I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why some of these things are happening in the world at the moment, why those elections this year went the way they did. And we are going through a big change. I waffle on every year about economics. I'm generally optimistic, so it'd be no surprise for you to find I'm going to be very optimistic again. The bad isn't so bad, and the ugly certainly not so ugly. But we are going through a change, and we're going through a profound change because there's been a kind of failure within the economy for the past 14 years, and you're going to get some new terms thrown at you because it's not possible for governments around the world to stick with the austerity measures that came in post the global financial crisis. Now, an interesting character called Yanis Varoufakis, who was the finance minister from Syriza, who was the party in charge of Greece when they went through their party. Remember him, he was the one who rocked up to number 10 in his leather jacket. And he's certainly a left-wing economist. But he said, post-global financial crisis, that the financiers, the bankers, received socialism, and everybody else, the masses, got austerity. And he was absolutely right. So we elected we elected actually a coalition government in 2010 in this country, but they went through with Osborne's plans for austerity. And unfortunately, it didn't work. And in fact, it was okay. Probably for most of us in this room, it's been okay over the last 14 years because asset prices have been going up and we probably on the whole have been getting a lot better off. But if you don't have assets, if you're new, if you're coming out of university, you're trying to find a house and it's not so good. Or if you're an ordinary working person, just perhaps a delivery driver driving a van, it's not so good. And the effect of this has been this. Now, I'm going to try this technology. Yes, it's worked. So this red line up here is RPI, which is up nearly 75% since 2010, and that's the average increase in wages. So what you can see here is that inflation has outshot wage increases by a dramatic amount, and that's not good news for the average person. Interestingly, inflation has been coming down, and James said in his part, what are people most concerned about? And they were most concerned about inflation. And this was the problem, that if you look down at the records that come out every month, food prices and energy prices were racing away. And that hurts the average family. So Biden has actually done a really good job with the American economy, and it didn't count for a jot. They put Trump in because it was the economy that they felt, that they experienced, that made the difference. So the politicians are now scrambling to convince you that their policies are different and to try and give you new measures so you don't get all jumpety about increasing debt. Now, I just put this up here because I thought this is a bit of a... These are the 16 chancellors that I can recall since I've been at work. And somebody said to me, which were the best budgets? I thought, that's interesting. Now, those of you that know me well know I love to go off at tangents, and we're going off at a planned tangent here. But I put these three up. And these are the three budgets that for me, the most impressive, interestingly. Geoffrey Howe's budget, 1981, a lot of you will remember that. The economy is in the teeth of a recession. Out comes this Tory budget, and it puts up taxes. 364 of the great and the good economists in the UK write a letter to the Times with their names on it saying this budget is a disaster for the economy. Within months, the economy turns, and it doesn't turn back for the next 10 years. So it just shows you when people like me get up on our feet, or economists are talking to you, very rarely do they get their predictions right, which is another issue, because at the moment, virtually everybody is predicting no recession next year, economy is bouncing back, US stocks going to even greater heights, and when the consensus is that strong, you have to be very, very wary. The second one is Kwarteng. Because the 2000, and the reason I like these, and I'll explain why these two budgets are just fascinating. This is obviously Kwarteng put the budget out with Truss when Truss was Prime Minister. But the one thing you got from there was what I would say was the old-fashioned traditional Tory budget. Lower taxes, we need to stimulate the economy, we'll put money in your pockets, you go out and do it. You make the choices. And I thought, actually, I read that budget again a couple of weeks ago before we sort of started this road show. And I thought, you know, there was a lot that they could have been explained, because it wasn't massively different from what Biden had done, and that's arguably why they did it in the first place, to get things going. But it was presented disastrously. You know, you can't do things without getting the Bank of England and the Office of National Statistics and the OBR on board, and Truss and Kwarteng failed to do that. But it was a traditional Tory budget. Reeves' budget, I like this, is a traditional Labour budget. Now, Reeves has probably put the biggest dent in my pocket ever, because it's colossally. If you're a business owner, you employ staff, good luck, you're going to pay more national insurance, you're going to pay more capital gains tax, and you're going to pay more corporation tax. It whacks you at all levels. But at least it's honest. It's what Labour do. And what she's saying is, well, we're going the other route. We don't trust you to spend your money. A lot of you save it. We'll spend it for you. So you've got these classics. Whether it's worked, I don't know. Nobody thought the 1981 budget from Howe would work. Will hers? Possibly. Because we have a systematic lack of investment in this country at the moment. And we have a lack of kind of the animal spirits which kicks things on. They've been sort of knocked out of us with 14, 15 years of austerity. So these are my favourite budgets. Now, the issue, of course, with this spending is debt. And this figure is being bandied around. We've got 2.68 million in debt in this country. This is government debt. And you can see, what I think is interesting is this was the period of austerity, and this is what was happening to debt. You know, if you don't get economic growth, you don't grow your tax base. If you don't grow your tax base, your debt goes up at a faster rate. And everybody's talking about this debt now. And the politicians are going to try and talk to you about different measures. Now, this is not a criticism of that. I have sympathy for the politicians in terms of the way in which this debt measure is very old. And in the modern economy, it doesn't necessarily work. But they're going to throw a couple of other measures at you. And you can pick and choose from all these, but the ones I'm going to focus on today, so you'll be knowledgeable when these come up, is gross national debt, government net worth, and public sector net financial liabilities, or PERSNFL, as it gets shortened to. So I'll explain these in how they're calculated by looking at a family situation. Now, one thing you need to never forget is if a politician tries to talk to you about the country's finances being any way similar to a household budget, they are not. Reeves alluded to this, and Maggie Thatcher alluded to this. But it's not true at all. A family does not have the ability to print their own cash, and the government does. A government's job is to get every factor of production, labour and capital, working as hard as it can to produce the biggest possible cake to share out. A family's job is to manage their budget, build some capital, make sure families you can feed everybody and you've got a roof over your head. It is not the same. But I'm going to use an example here just to explain how these measures work. Taylor has got a mortgage of 200,000 and a car loan of 10,000. Taylor's got assets comprising a bank deposit of 5,000, a portfolio of shares and bonds of 50,000, and a house worth 250,000. So let's start with the measure that you are used to getting talked to about in the media. Net debt. Taylor's net debt is a 200,000 mortgage, 10,000 car loan, but with net debt, those red blocks I showed you earlier, you can take off what's very liquid. So the government, when calculating its net debt, takes off the money it's got in the bank or the currency it's got stored up. And that means that Taylor's net debt is £205,000. Right, net financial liabilities, slightly different here. We've got debt again, 200,000 mortgage, 10K car loan. We can take the bank deposit off, but now we can take off the financial assets, 50K. Taylor's net financial liabilities are 155,000. And finally, the one that within families we all get used to talking about is Taylor's net worth. And all we've got to do is add these up, and this time we can put the house in. So actually, Taylor is worth net 95,000. Now, they are huge differences, and they are pretty big when you get to the public sector as well. Because if we look at government net debt, we get 2.69 trillion. If we look at public sector net financial liabilities, we get 2.28. It's about 400 billion less. And net worth is 86 billion negative, but not everything will be counted properly on the government balance sheet. Now, here's a teaser. Does anybody know what these financial assets are that the government has that reduces this? Does anybody know the biggest element that knocks that debt down? And who said? No, land comes out on net worth, this one. These are financial assets. So somebody owes the government money. Who do you think it is? Students. Students. The government has an asset. We have an asset where our kids owe us a load of money. They probably owe you money anyway, but they owe the government another 220 billion. And interestingly, you remember this, and we're going to get on to education in this country in a minute, because Blair's government introduced tuition fees back in 98, and public sector net financial liabilities began to get recorded in 97. They knew exactly what they were going to do. They were always planning to start to say we can talk about public sector net financial liabilities rather than net debt, and it will look a lot better, and it does. And it's perfectly legitimate, but you've got to understand where these things are coming from. And then net worth at the end there. So this is the most difficult one to measure, because what is the value of everything the government's got in its balance sheet? We're going to come on to that in a minute, but it's not as easy to measure as it is for companies. But so the position's not that bad. And if you look at, because the other measure which I've not touched on is debt as a multiple of income. You know, you go to the building society, you get 3-4 times your income. So if you look at total debt, and we're looking at that net debt one, it's about 100% of GDP of income, which in the long run isn't that bad, because 100% of GDP is around about the over 300-year average. So when the governments have a lot of scope, and the governments very often, they dig their own hole. So to get in, they blame the opposition for running the country badly. They say, oh, they left us with no money, which is what the Tories said about Labour in 2010. And this time around, oh, we got a 22 billion black hole. Black hole, my foot. There's no 22 million black hole. I mean, it might not add up properly, but it's not that bad. But both groups do it. But having done it, they get themselves into a bit of a mess. And they then can't turn around and say, oh, actually, it's not that bad. And the Tories definitely couldn't say it in 2010 because Labour had not left it in that bad a condition. And in fact, I never was a big Gordon Brown fan, but he did a really good job with the global financial crisis and led the way. So it's not that bad. Government is in a pretty good shape, but I think they've got themselves a bit stuck with using the language which they've used to get themselves elected. Much easier to say to you, the other lot are doing really bad, vote for us, we'll get the debt down, than it is to say, the other lot are doing really bad, they've run the debt up, but actually, we're going to run it up even more, and that's going to be very effective. But if you want to see what happens when that works, look at the US. Still didn't get Biden elected, but it was effective. So, the country isn't just about the government, the country's about families, and the country's about companies. What sort of situation are they in? These are assets. The orange bars and the green bars are the assets of our UK corporations, and the red bars are the debt. So both have been going up a bit, but net, you've got about 1.22 trillion of net assets. Now, companies tend to fund themselves with some equity and some debt. So you tend to find that central black line, this one, should be round about zero long run, which it is. But it's been going up a bit recently because companies have not been investing that much and they've been saving their cash. So they've got into a very, very good position, 1.22 trillion net. So UK companies are in a really good position. The rest of the world is beginning to wake up to that with one or two takeovers coming along. But we like the UK relative to the US because it's very cheap and a lot of these companies produce great dividends, a lot of cash, and they've got solid balance sheets. Families have done even better. You know, the average family in this country has never been better off. Well, actually, probably were 2 years ago before prices went down, property prices went down a little bit. But in this case, we've got the red bars as debt, we've got the green bars as financial assets, and the brown bars as non-financial assets, in other words, tangibles, which of course mostly are houses. And the reason it's come down a little bit at the end is because house prices have slipped a little bit the past couple of years as interest rates started to go up. But families are in really, really good situation. And if you take this all together, the whole lot, and you look at the whole economy, you'll find that this country sits on assets of about 22.5 trillion, which is significantly bigger than the 2.68 trillion that the government of government debt. It's really quite massive. Total debt goes up. Debt will always go up because people borrow to get things done. It's a normal thing. You know, if you have savers, you have to have somebody borrowing it. It's not, we can't all be borrowers. We can't all be savers. We need to balance them out. That's what makes the whole economy go round. But that's in really good nick. And then if you look at the whole thing on net worth, you include government, corporate sector and families, we're sitting on a massive lump of capital, net of all debt, £12 trillion. So, UK in not such a bad position at all. Right, I'm going to conclude. There's some reasons to be cheerful this Christmas. We are remarkably innovative. An example of that was what AstraZeneca did in conjunction with Oxford University to get the vaccination out. We are very innovative across a range of measures. In fact, we're measured on this, we're the 5th most innovative country in the world. That's us. So this is kind of innovation, GDP per head. The only people ahead of us are Singapore, US, Sweden, and Switzerland. So UK, we've got some brilliant businesses. And in terms of education, what Blair did back in 97, 98, you know, whatever you think about student debt, a lot of people in this room would have gone to university and had it paid for by the state, which is lovely, but it doesn't happen now. But it has enabled more money to go into universities. As a result of that, our universities have really flourished. So, in terms of the top 10 universities in the world, in this QS survey, Imperial came number 2, Oxford came number 3, and Cambridge then came number 5. 3 of the top 5 universities globally were British. Then if you go down a bit further, UCL came number 9. So 3 of the top 5, 4 of the top 10. And if you take the Times survey, Oxford came number 1. So we have a thriving education system, certainly at university level. And we've got very strong friends. This is quite interesting because this kind of puts in context what global threat looks like. And this is the spending by the top 10 countries in the world on defense. You see at the far right, America dwarfs everybody else. It spends $832 billion a year on its defense budget, more than the next 9 put together. We come in number 6 at $63 billion. You know, we should not be on Trump's hit list because we do spend over 2% of GDP. Germany, on the other hand, don't, and they're needing to boost this up a little bit, as are France. But if you look at the allies on there, there's lots and lots of spending on defense. And then, last of all, financial strength. We've got this massive, great balance sheet in the country to work with. So these are lots of reasons to be cheerful. And just to conclude, we are cheerful because this survey on happiness shows the happiest countries in the world, and the Brits are number one. There it is. Ray Dalio, Great Powers Index. And that's an American saying that. That's an American saying that. Now, if anyone's looking at it, some of you are very smart. So to save you coming up and asking me the question, being a typical American, they look at the UK and then Germany, France, and everybody else are lumped in as Europe. So the very happy Scandinavians, who actually are the happiest people in the world, are not there because they're dragged down by the miserable Germans and French. But we got up to number one. So the future, just to conclude them, because just some words of warning, some predictions for the next year. First of all, and I haven't got this one on there, James showed the performance of the Magnificent Seven, and I'm going to have a little prediction here, and you can really hold me to this. Next year, they will underperform. That is my prediction. They will underperform in 2025. If I'm wrong, then I'll do a forfeit. You can work out whatever it is. But that is what I think will happen, and this is being recorded, so it'll be on record. So the secular bond bull market is over because this austerity business is done now. When you've got, when you get lots of austerity, one of the things that happens is the central banks, Bank of England, respond. So the government says, we're pulling the belt in. And so the central bank says, well, if the government putting the belt in, we better loosen it. So they bring interest rates down. But that's not going to happen anymore. This is done now. You're going to get much more normal bond yields. So anybody that tells you we're going back to long-term interest rates for 10-year, 20-year gilts at sub 1%, it's done. It's not going to happen. And the bond market won't come to the rescue of a weak equity market as it has done previously. Equity market valuations are like a barbell, and they are at the moment. The guys have talked about this. You've got some very, very expensive stocks at one end and some great value stocks at the other. It's a great time to be a stock picker, even if it's a bit painful when the world's biggest index is doing well because it's got these mega stocks in there. But it's good fun at the moment on investment team looking at this type of stuff. UK looks cheap, and possibly Europe too. I mean, German stocks are pretty bombed out because they've had a rough time of it. They're worried about Trump. China's beginning to eat their lunch. They've moved up the tech scan in terms of the type of things they're producing. But that's made a lot of those businesses very, very cheap. Trump may or may not prove inflationary. I don't know. This question's sort of got asked, will Trump be inflationary? Tariffs are inflationary, but only tending to be a one-off. The most inflationary thing that Trump would do is to do mass deportations. There's about 11 million illegal immigrants in the workforce in the US. Around 1.5 million of them work in construction, and that accounts for about 13% of the construction workforce in the US. So if Trump sends them all back, you're going straight back to an inflationary type of pressure that we had in 2022, where there just weren't enough workers to go round. My guess, clamp down on people coming in, send some back. Obama was pretty aggressive with his repatriation, which the Democrats don't like to talk about so much. But I don't think he's going to prove inflationary. He's very transactional. He's a property developer. I think he'll make things and see what happens. And he does turn on a dime in terms of policy. Austerity is dead and buried. We've talked about this. Lots of great opportunities out there for disciplined investors that hold their nerve, but be very careful about the get-rich-quick assets. There's a lot more money going into. I still can't work out what crypto is. If anybody knows what it is, come and tell me. Because it strikes me, no government in history ever gives up control of their currency. Digital currencies can be produced, actually are being produced by major governments, and it just sort of goes along. It could be the biggest scam in history. But if you are in it and you've made money, well done. But don't bet your shirt on it. Because, there's a warning goes out on crypto type investments that you could lose all your money. You know, with us, you have to put out your value of stocks and shares can go up as well as down. But we don't say to you, you could lose all your money in the portfolio, because it doesn't work like that, because you hold a diversified broad range of assets in the economy itself. So unless the economy disappears, your money can't all disappear.